Hi there! So you want to learn how to do virtual production? I'm going to show you how to do virtual production with any screen. That's right, you're going to be able to use any screen you want. If it's a computer screen or a TV or even one of those big LED screens that you see on Mandalorian in professional production. It's the same technique and it applies for all of them. My name is Chet and this is Jellyfingers. Alright you guys. So for this tutorial, we're just going to keep things simple, and then it's up to you if you want to take this further and to make it more advanced. In case you're not sure what virtual production is, it's just usually a mix between virtual reality and film production. And what that usually entails is that you have a physical camera and a physical screen, and you want to show on the screen a digital environment that changes based on the camera's position. And once you have the physical camera VR tracked, then what's going to be shown on the virtual screen is going to be shown on the physical screen, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, it will, trust me. And also, if you use this method, you're going to be able to use any screen, you're going to be able to use any camera you want, and you're also going to be able to use any VR tracking device. So you can use a Vive tracker. You can even use a Quest controller like this, duct taped it to your phone. It should be enough to get you started. So let's just head over to the computer and get started. Okay, so we're going to be doing three main things. We're going to use a plugin called LiveLink to get the positional data of the tracker that we're going to put on our camera. And we're going to make a blueprint script that tells us where the camera is in relation to the tracker. And the most important and also most difficult part is to make an nDisplay configuration that determines where the physical and virtual screen is. So let's just open up Unreal and get started. Alright, so we're going to open up Unreal 5.4. I know this method works with 5.3 and 5.2. And once you get this screen, you're going to choose what kind of project template you want. And if you go to film, video, and live events, we have this template called in-camera VFX that we're going to be using because it contains some plugins that we need. You don't need starter content, you don't need ray tracing. I'm just going to name ours VP Test, for example. Create. And once the project is finally started, then you're going to see something like this, which is a starter scene for the in-camera VFX project template. It has a bunch of stuff in here that you can use, but we're going to make all this ourselves. But just to look at a little bit at what we're going to be making, here's basically a full VP setup with a virtual camera that if you move around, you can see on this big screen what the camera sees right there, which is shown here in the camera preview window. And there's some lights and stuff in here, but we're gonna make our own scene and then build everything from scratch. So straight away, just go to File, New Level, and select this basic level because you get some elements in there automatically. You click Create. We're not gonna save the changes within this scene. We get this sort of empty scene, and we're gonna save it right away. And I'm going to make a new folder in here called Maps, because that's what it's called in Unreal. I'm going to go in there and call this the VP Setup Map. I'm going to save that, because what we're going to do is we're going to use this map or scene to create all the parts that are going to make up our VP setup. So all the blueprints and all the configs and stuff, all the assets we need, we're going to make in here just to test them. And then later we're going to make a scene that has 3D elements and stuff in it that looks good. So for now, we're just going to be using this VP setup map to get everything sorted. So now we need to install the right plugins. Like I said, this template comes with a lot of plugins that you need, but we do need to make sure that we have some essential ones to get this to work. So first of all, we're going to need OpenXR. We have that one. We're also going to need OpenXR Vive Tracker because that's what we're going to be using. I said earlier that you can use the Quest controller, but in this example, I'm going to be using the Vive tracker, and then you can try to figure out the Quest controller on your own if you want to. But before I hit restart, I'm just going to make sure we have all the other plugins that we need. So we need a few more plugins before we restart. We're going to need nDisplay. We can see that it is activated, but we're also going to need LiveLink. The main one is activated, but we also need Vive LiveLink XR. Yes. And LiveLink over nDisplay. And once you have all of those, you can restart. Once the project is open again, we're going to set up the LiveLink stuff. But just one small thing before that. as you noticed, this scene opens whenever I open Unreal, and I want our test scene to open whenever I open this project. So to fix that, just go to project settings, under maps and modes, just choose your scene here as the default map. VP setup. Okay, so now we're going to get started with LiveLink. And to get the LiveLink window, you just need to go to Window, Virtual Production, LiveLink. I like to dock it down here, and this is where we're going to add our tracker. So this is a good time to turn on your Vive tracker. And once the light is green and it is active, you can go to Add Source, LiveLink XR Source, Track Trackers, make sure that's enabled, and then click Add. So something is added here, but we don't see any tracker roles in this window. So we need to do a little hack to make this work. So I'm going to close Unreal for now, and we need to do two things. First, we need to add a little line of code in our shortcut here for the Unreal version that we're using. So if you're using Unreal 5.4 or 5.3 or whatever, it's still the same. Just right click this, go to Properties, and right here where it says Target, go to the very end of this and write this. Type in space dash XR tracking only in one word. Oh, XR tracking only with a space. Click apply, okay. And the second thing we need to do is we need to give our tracker a role. So right click on the tracker, go to Manage Trackers, and click on Manage Trackers here. And you see I've already done this for my tracker. This is what my tracker is called, and it's green, it's lighting green because I turned it on and it's lighting green. But for Unreal to recognize this, you need to give it some sort of role. I like to just go camera since I'm actually using it for a camera, but it doesn't matter. You can choose whatever you want from these. It just needs some sort of role. So I'll go camera, close, and that's that. Now I'm going to start Unreal again. Just make sure that before you start Unreal again, that your Vive tracker is active, that the base stations are active, and of course that it has the tracker role, and that you put in that shortcut thing. If that's all set, you should be good. And now when you open up Unreal again, you'll see that it goes straight into the VP setup scene that we specified in the project settings. And now we can try to see if the LiveLink stuff works. But add source, LiveLink XR source, make sure the tracker is enabled, click add, and there we go, it works. This one, you get these two ones. This one is the head mounted display. We're not going to use that, but this one is called Vive Tracker Roll Camera. So that's the one we're going to be using. Okay, so that's it for LiveLink as of now. Just make sure that whenever you start your project, that you put in XR tracking only in the shortcut, that you have your Vive tracker set as camera in the Manage Trackers menu, and that everything is turned on like this before you start Unreal. And as you can see, there's no Vive tracker in our scene. We just have this ready to go. So in the next step, we're actually going to be making the blueprint that puts our Vive tracker in our scene as a 3D object that moves around with rotation and position and all that. So to make this blueprint, you just right click here in the contents folder. I'm just going to leave a bunch of these assets right here. You can sort them out in whatever folder system you want. But to make this blueprint, right click here, go to blueprint class, and we're going to make an actor blueprint. And then we're going to call this camera follows tracker underscore BP for blueprint. I'm just going to name it what it does. So there's our blueprint. I'm just going to drag it into our scene straight away. It's not going to do anything. And I'm going to zero out the position just so it's centered in the scene. And then we're going to double click it, and I'm going to shelf it up here so that I have all my stuff in tabs like this. Don't need the plugins anymore. And by the way, I'm going to turn off my tracker so it doesn't drain battery. And here inside the blueprint, the first thing I'm going to do under components over here, I'm going to add LiveLink controller. And if you click on that component, you will see a LiveLink tab here that says what device to use for this tracking. You're going to choose your tracker, and then these objects should be following our tracker in the 3D workspace, but we need to be able to see it. And in this viewport window, you can add visual stuff that makes you see the object. So we're just going to click add arrow. We're going to add an arrow like that, and if you go out into your scene, you should see this arrow moving around because it's attached to your tracker. If you don't see the arrow, click your camera follow tracker blueprint object and just click on this thing. It might refresh the tracking. It usually does. And also, if you're having troubles that it's still not doing that, then check your head-mounted display and turn off the Vive menu if the menu is active in there. And if you see this arrow waving around in your scene in sync with your Vive tracker, then you're in a good place and we can start working on attaching a camera to this. So to do that, first we need to create a camera. You click on this object and we're going to go to Cinematic and create a Cine Camera Actor. We're going to call this VP Cam. Now, if you click on the camera and activate the local coordinates, you can turn it around a bit and you will see that it is the X that is pointing forward and the C is pointing upward, Y is pointing to the right. And this is going to be important once we put the camera in here. As you see, it's the same with the arrow. So if I were to attach the camera right here, we would be pointing along that arrow. But that would only be true if the tracker was right on top of our physical camera lens, which it isn't. We're going to use a phone for this example, and that means that the phone lens is going to be a little bit to the side of the Vive tracker. So to set up this, first I'm going to name this arrow Tracker Arrow. Then I'm going to create a new arrow that is a child of this tracker arrow, and this arrow I'm going to call Cam Arrow. If I pull this camera arrow a little bit to the side, 20 units means 20 centimeters. We might have to adjust this afterwards, but just put this in another color just to see the difference. And if you compile and save and go into your scene, you will see both arrows waving around. Okay, but let's stay in here. But okay, now we need to do the actual node magic in our blueprint. So if you go to Event Graph, this is where we can create all sorts of nodes to make the objects follow each other. We're just going to delete all of this. And normally with these blueprints, you will call on an event like begin play or tick. Begin play is activated at the start of a game, and event tick is run each frame. But we're not going to use any of those. We're going to use LiveLink's own updating system, because tick and start play is just valid when you actually run the game. But we want this to update while we're waving this camera around without running the game, but still in real time. And that is handled by the LiveLink system. So we're going to need one of these LiveLink nodes. If you click on the LiveLink component and you go down here, you can add a onLiveLink updated node. So if you click that, you get this thing. And that means each time LiveLink is updated, then whatever stuff you put here will activate. And what we essentially want to do is we want to tell a camera from our scene to be attached to this arrow. So in order to do that, let's just click and drag something out from here. We're going to be asked what node we want, and we want a set actor transform node. And this is going to set the transform values for our camera. We just need to put some stuff in here to make it follow the arrow. This arrow, I'm going to drag that in here. And since I can't add the arrows onto there directly, I need to get the position of this arrow in real time. And I do that by adding get word transform. And I can put that into the new transform. And now, of course, I need to get the camera from my scene and put that in as the target that needs to be changed. So then I need to make a new variable of type Cine Camera. And I'm going to make it so that I can put whatever camera I want on this same blueprint, no matter what scene I'm in. So let's say in one scene I have a camera set up for a phone. In another scene I have a camera set up for a DSLR camera, and so on. So I want to be able to use the same blueprint for whatever camera. So I need to make a new variable and call it scene cam, and make it as a type of scene camera actor object reference. Click that one and click instance editable so that you can change it in your scene instead of going into this blueprint all the time. Compile and save. And now we're going to tell this variable, whatever camera it represents, to be the target of changing the transformation. And now in my scene, I can go to the camera follows tracker blueprint that I made, and there will be a variable here. There it is, called scene cam. And here I can choose my VP cam. I click on that, and then you see my camera pops to my tracker, and I make sure that my tracker is active. And then I can see that my camera is actually following my Vive tracker. And now if I go into the blueprint itself in the viewport, I can change wherever this camera is. If I put it up there, compile and save, I can see that the camera is now up there. And if I even turn this up like this, compile and save, you can see that it replicates in the scene. So now it's just important that you put the differences between these arrows with the same measurements as the differences between your physical Vive tracker and your camera. So if the relationship between your tracker and camera looks like this, then the axis will be like this. And if your tracker is like, if your tracker is like this, the axis will be like this. So the axis will have to be replicated like that in the following script. You'll figure it out if you just try a bit. So for me, I'm using my phone. I'm just gonna put around 5 centimeters to the right of my tracker, or actually 10 centimeters. That should be better. I compile and save, and that's actually it for the camera follow tracker blueprint. And just to show you quickly, since we made this variable instance editable in the blueprint, meaning that we can choose whatever camera we want, just to show you, I'm gonna make a new camera. It's over there. And if you see this camera that is following now, it has a fairly narrow field of view. So if I take this new camera and make the field of view really wide, just so you see the difference, I can actually just change the camera I want. Now it's the other camera that's following the tracker. You see it's a fairly wide field of view, and this one is standing still, the narrow one. If I change it back, VP cam, and that's just to show you that you can use this blueprint in whatever level you want with whatever camera you want. You can just make a camera in the scene and just plug it on there. So we can just delete that. We can just delete this player start thing too. And now we're gonna look at making the actual nDisplay configuration assets. That's sort of the meat and potato of this virtual production setup. So I'm just gonna show you how to make one first, and then we're gonna do all the adjustments afterwards. So to make one of these nDisplay configuration assets, just go right click here, go to nDisplay, click on nDisplay config. We're gonna create a new config and just call it VP nDisplay. Double click on that, dock it up here, and here we can see a 3D space with a screen in there. But remember, this is a default setup. This is a default saying that this is the point of origin, and this is sort of the forward axis, and that the screen is 1 meter in front of us and it's this big. Okay, so now just to get this working so that we can see it work in the scene, we're just gonna add some things here. We need to add a cluster node. You need to click add new cluster node, and the only thing you need to worry about here is the screen size. So put this to the resolution of the screen you'll be using, and the rest we don't need to worry about. Just click add. So here we get this little screen here in a preview window, and what we need to do now is go to VP0, and up here under projection policy type, we're gonna change this to mesh, and then as a mesh, we're gonna choose this nDisplay screen, and then you'll see that the screen is updated to see what the environment is like around it. But this nDisplay configuration assets also need to know what camera it's gonna be using, what camera is gonna affect this screen. So we need to go up here and add a component called ICVFX camera. Click on that. You will get a camera into the scene, which you can see reacts, which the screen reacts to. And with that camera selected, we could tell Unreal that we want to use our VP camera here, but to have the same advantages that we had with the other blueprint, we want to be able to change this into whatever camera we have in the scene, so that we can use this same nDisplay configuration for multiple scenes and multiple cameras, that we can just change the camera depending on what scene we're in. So compile and save this. We're going to put the nDisplay configuration asset into our scene. We're going to zero it out just so we know that it's in the center, and turn on your Vive tracker. I keep turning it off to save battery power. And we can see that it's tracking, but the nDisplay screen is not reacting to this camera. So we need to tell the nDisplay system to use our camera by clicking on the camera component, And then down here, we can choose our VP cam. I click on that, and now the screen is reacting to my camera. And just to explain to you what we're looking at here is that we see our screen sort of showing the environment behind it, and we see this little square inside of our screen that is changing depending on where the camera is looking at it. This small part is called the inner frustum, and it's showing what the actual camera is seeing. The other part is called the outer frustum. If you look at the inner frustum now, I can see while looking at my camera view that my field of view is very narrow. So I'm going to change that, and we can see that it expands, and then I see more. And I know that since I'm going to be using my phone, that this should be at 26. And you can see the inner frustum changing when you change that focal length here. And if we look into our nDisplay configuration, you'll also see that this changes with this temporary camera in here. And the thing is that this inner frustum is what the camera sees through the camera lens. This outer frustum is what's going to be shown on the screen where the camera doesn't see. So what the camera sees over here is in this little screen, and what's outside here is going to be determined by this point here. This is sort of like the default point of view. It's called the default viewpoint. And you can change this if you want it to be something specific. But we're just going to leave it like that for now. So now everything is technically working, but I can tell that if I'm pointing the virtual camera at the virtual screen, I'm not actually pointing the physical Vive tracker to my screen. And that's what we're going to change. We're going to change all these measurements in the nDisplay configuration. In order to put those measurements into nDisplay, we need to know those measurements from the physical world. And in order to do that, we need to measure the physical relationship between our screen and our VR setup. So first I'm going to tell you what those measurements are, and then I'm going to tell you how to measure them. And then I'm going to show you how to put it into nDisplay. So let's say this is your desktop setup. But the only thing that matters is the screen and the floor which the VR setup is calibrated to. So first of all, we have the screen size in height and width. We're going to call this X and Y. We need to know where the origo point is, the point you see in your VR setup if you put your head-mounted display on. And we're going to need the forward direction of that VR setup. And those two are just to figure out the screen direction degree, which is the difference in degrees between the VR forward direction and a direction pointing straight at the screen, pointing straight at the center point of that screen, on the floor, not into the air, but like directly towards it in a 2D plane. And once we have that direction, we're going to need the distance from the VR origo point to the screen center point, also in a 2D plane, because then we're going to need the screen height, and we're going to figure out how high the screen is from the ground. And the last thing we're going to find is the screen rotation degree, which is the difference between the rotation of the screen and the screen direction. And this is also a variable stored in degrees. So those are the ones you need, and it doesn't matter what VR setup you have, you're gonna have an origo point and a forward direction, and that means that you can figure this out in nDisplay. So let's do the screen measurements first. You simply measure the screen, but remember, measure only the pixels. Measure the screen from where the pixels starts and end, in height and width, X and Y. Then you're going to need to measure the screen height from the ground. Now this height value is from the ground to the center of the screen. That's just how it works in nDisplay. So once you have the height of the screen's lowest point, the point of the lowest pixel down to the ground, you can then add half of the screen Y measurement to get the full distance from the center of the screen to the floor. The rest of the variables are a bit tricky. So the ones we need are the origo point in your VR setup physical space and your VR setup's forward direction. So we're going to call these origo point and origo forward direction. So we're going to measure the origo point and the origo forward direction at the same time. You can do this by putting on your head-mounted display, turn on one of the Vive controllers, and place the controller with the hole straight above your VR origo. And also point the controller in the same direction as the origo forward direction. So once you've done that, leave the controller on the floor, take off the head-mounted display, and draw across where the origo point is. And for the screen direction, you just sort of aim a line from the origo point towards your screen. Now the screen distance is a bit tricky to measure because it needs to be a straight line from the point to the screen center. but the line can't go up or down. It needs to be straight forward in the air. So a trick I often use is I use a lamppost, place that on the origo point, and then measure from that lamppost over to the center of the screen. So if you want to do that, just add some more markers on the floor so you can easily center the actual pole, and then in a straight line from the screen center to that pole is your screen distance. And just make the measurement as good as you can. And for the last variable, the screen rotation, we need to get the difference between the screen's straight forward direction and the screen direction going from the origo to the screen. So you can use the square to mark off the forward direction of the screen, or just use eye measurement. It's going to work anyway. And now that we've finally got those measurements, we're ready to put them into our nDisplay configuration. Okay, so now we're going to put in the measurements, and we're going to start with the easy part, the size of the screen. You just put those values in here, and you might have to disable the ratio lock if you want to put in something specific, but mine is correct now, so that's good. And now we need to put in the height, which is going to be this value, location Z. I'm going to put in 100 because that's the distance between my floor and the center of my screen. Now for the origo point and the origo forward direction from our VR setup, we're not going to need to put in anywhere here because it is here. That's the point, and that is the representation of the forward direction. I know it's the forward direction because I see numbers in plus value here and in negative value going that way. And so we're going to put in the variables in relation to these two. So for the screen direction, we need to put the screen a little bit to the left here. I need to rotate it over here. But I need to be able to rotate it from this point because I can't do this and move it over. It's going to be inaccurate. So I'm going to put something here that we can help rotate the screen with. You click add on components and make an arrow, just so we have some visual representation of this. We then have an arrow that we can rotate, but the screen needs to follow. So I need to put the screen underneath this arrow as a child of this arrow. Then when I rotate it, I can get those angles. I need to disable the snapping. And my screen direction angles were 42, so I'm going to put that into rotation Z in minus. Notice that it's going to be in minus because my screen is on this side of the forward direction. And now I need that distance, which is going to be this value. Make sure that you have your local axis activated up here so that you can pull directly on the Z axis there. And mine was 90 centimeters, so I'm going to put in 90 right here. And then the last value we're going to put in is the screen rotation. So this offset from the screen direction. It's going to be in rotate Z, and you see it doesn't have any rotation on here. So I can just put in the rotation that I had on my screen, which is 20.2. And remember to give it a minus if it goes in the wrong direction. And that's it. Now we've implemented all the variables. So you can just chuck this out of the arrow parent and delete the arrow. And the screen is going to stay there. Compile and save. And I can see that this seems accurate in my virtual space. When I'm pointing my physical Vive tracker to my physical screen, the virtual camera is also pointing at the virtual screen. So now it looks like this is working. We're going to give it a test run. Now before we test this, just save everything up here, save all. And to quickly test this VP setup, you just go up to the nDisplay button up here and click Launch Last Node Configuration. Now this is going to close the Unreal Editor and it's going to open in sort of the nDisplay program. Okay, so this is what I get. Nothing is really updating, so something is wrong. We need to quit this and go back into the Unreal Editor. Now notice that every time you start your Unreal project, you have to put in the LiveLink sources. And this is why your tracking doesn't work when your nDisplay program is running your project. The project basically has to know what sort of LiveLink sources to have in your scene at all times. That's easy to fix. Just add your sources again. There it is working, and we just need to save this as a LiveLink preset. So just go up here to preset, click on the top of save as preset, and just save it like that. There it is, and now we just need to tell this project to always load this at the start. And that way the nDisplay program is going to use it at the start also. So just go to project settings and just type in LiveLink. And here you see default LiveLink preset. This is the one we want to load. Click away that, save all, and now try running your nDisplay config. And now we're actually getting some results. We can see the inner and outer frustum. We can see that the point of view is being changed when I change my position on my tracker. You can even test it on your phone as well. Just hold the tracker 10 centimeters to the side of your camera lens and look through your camera video feed. I can see that the inner and outer frustum is a bit wrong, and it's a bit hard to see if the tracking really works because we don't have any graphics in our scene. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add a background of some sort, and the quickest and easiest way I know is to just add a HDRI backdrop plugin. I'm going to restart Unreal quickly. Remember to have the Vive tracker on every time you restart Unreal. Okay, I'm just going to turn off my Vive tracker to save battery, and then I'm quickly going to add the HDR backdrop. Go up here, and under lights you should find HDR backdrop. Zero out the position, and we don't need that other floor right now. It can be flickering a bit. I'm just going to delete that. Select the HDR backdrop and zero it out. Now it's in the center of the scene, and we have something to look at. In the background at least. And I see that my screen is hovering above the ground. I sort of want my low point of my screen to be right where the ground is. But always remember this, don't ever move your environment around to fit your nDisplay screen. You need to place around the actual nDisplay configuration asset. And that brings me to an important point. Whenever we do want to move around this nDisplay configuration, we need to move the camera with it. Because the camera or the Vive tracker has until now given its positional data into the world space. And since all these elements, you notice how I zeroed them out all the time to keep them at the 0 point? That's just for testing. But now I need the camera and the tracker to operate within the local space of the nDisplay. And since it is the camera follow tracker blueprint that controls the position of the camera, I'm going to child that under nDisplay. Now when I move the nDisplay configuration around, the tracker is going to follow. So I'm going to turn on my tracker just to test this. So now the tracking is live. I'm moving the camera around, and if I move the nDisplay configuration, my camera moves as if it's living in the space of the nDisplay configuration. And that's what I want. If I take the camera follow tracker blueprint out from being a child, then whenever I move my screen, the camera does not follow and I will not get the result I want. And like I said, I want my screen to be right above the ground, so I'm going to pull this down. I'm going to turn off the snapping, and I'm going to pull it so that it's just above the ground. Okay, and already I want to test this. So save all and hit the launch nDisplay button. And it looks like this sort of works. I'm looking at the ground and just checking if it's sort of sticking to the low end of the screen, and it looks fine. But I need more 3D stuff to test if this actually is working. So we need to open our project again. Always remember to have your tracker on when you turn on your project. And now it's open. I'm going to turn off my tracker to save battery. And so to test this, we need to put stuff sort of around the screen here, as if there was a stage right inside of the screen. If we put stuff sort of close to the screen like that, you're going to see most of the parallax effect and stuff like that, which is good for testing. So just go up here and make some shapes. Okay, so now I've added some 3D objects in the close proximity of the screen, and I want to save all and test nDisplay straight away. And this is a good time to actually watch it through your phone. If I ignore the outer frustum thing here, I'm gonna look at the ground. See, it looks like it's tracking pretty good. But obviously there's this issue of we keep seeing this edge from the inner frustum. So I'm gonna fix that, and I'm gonna fix this focus issue. I see that everything is out of focus. So let's do the focus first. I'm gonna be keeping a distance at around this. So if I make the focus right here, and considering that this is supposed to replicate my phone in this case, my physical camera, which is probably going to be focusing on some physical object standing right in front of the screen, I want to set the focus of this camera to also be right here in front of the screen. So to do that, just select the camera, go to focus settings, click on this draw debug focus plane, and start pulling the focus distance back. You're going to see this big purple plate appear out of nowhere, which is attached to my camera, and it's like visually showing you where the focus distance is. So I'm going to put that right in front of my screen. There we go. Then I turn off the debug plane. There we go. Now we know that this point is being in focus all the time. And I can actually see it in the video. The ground is much clearer now. And then there's the issue of the inner frustum. So if you look here, if I move my camera around fairly quickly, then I'll see the edges of the inner and outer frustum. Ideally, this computer would be quick enough to just render this no matter how fast I move it. And then I would make the inner frustum to match exactly my camera sort of field of view. But like I said, this is a sort of have fun and test sort of project. So we're going to take some liberties. And I'm actually just going to turn up the current focal length, or down rather, so that the focal length or the field of view gets bigger. And if you look at the screen here, you can see that the inner frustum gets bigger. And if you look at the camera preview, you'll see that it also changes. So just get that up so wide that you can turn it around without it lagging much. Something like that. Just remember that the more you're making your screen render in real time, all this tracking and stuff, the more computer power it's going to need. So you might want to adjust this according to your processing power. And that looks better, so let's test it again. Save all, and display button. This is looking pretty good. I can see I can move my camera fairly quickly without seeing the inner frosted edges. But now I'm noticing something else. My screen is tilted a little bit backwards and it is affecting the ground plane. I'm going to fix that quickly. So I'm going to start Unreal again. Remember the tracker. So as you can see here, my virtual screen is completely straight. So we have to go into the nDisplay configuration and tilt this screen back just a little bit. Just go by eyesight. We're having fun. There, I'm giving mine minus 3.1 degrees. Should be alright. We test again, save all, and display. And I can tell it's noticeably better. I start Unreal again, tracker. Okay, so just some last fixes now on your nDisplay before we round this up. Remember, we've done all the measurements and all this stuff by eyesight and just quick and dirty just to have fun and learn the basics of this. And sometimes we do get errors to the measurements. And instead of going through it all again, we can just try to fix these errors with as little changes as possible. So here's a technique I use. I take the tracker and point the center right down at one of the corners. And I see where the red arrow is. It is also pointing sort of at the corner. And I go over here. I point the center at this corner. And I see that that is also pointing at the corner. But check out this. If I move my Vive tracker along my screen, I see that it is definitely not moving along the screen, the virtual screen. So I need to rotate that screen a bit and bring it a bit closer. And unfortunately, you can't do these changes while in the scene view. You have to go into the nDisplay and back and forth. So let's just try. I'm going to rotate this a little bit and I'm going to bring it a little bit forward. And that seems to be much more like it. So you can keep this going until you get the perfect result. But since I have made some improvements, I'm going to test it straight away. Save all, and display. And this seems good. Open Unreal again, tracker. Alright, and now for the final stage, we're going to build a new scene that is more graphic and cool to show you that you can take all your virtual production assets into another script and it'll work exactly the same. And to get a hold of some great 3D assets and environments, I would go to fab.com to support your local 3D artists, or just go on the limited time free tab here. And every month Fab has a lot of free assets. So you can get some environments with characters and stuff. I've gathered up many free assets over my time and I'm going to use some of my environment assets right now. So I'm going to use this African slate quarry asset you see here. I'm going to add that to my project. And then in my project I can find it here. It comes with its own maps. So I open that. And I'm just going to delete all the stuff I don't need. I'm going to make an HDR backdrop, put it to the center or to where I'm going to be. I want to turn it a bit so I don't see that bush. And now I can chuck in my VP assets. So I'm first going to chuck in the nDisplay, then the camera photo tracker blueprint. I'm going to child that under the nDisplay. I'm going to make a camera real quick and call it VP cam like always. And then we have to remember to tell both these scripts to use that camera. So on the nDisplay we go to the camera component, go down here and choose our camera from the scene. And the same with the follow blueprint. We made our own variable at the top. Select there. And if you turn on your Vive tracker, you'll see that it looks like it works. So we're going to test it with nDisplay. Save all, then the nDisplay button. And okay, we can see that it is working, but we need to make the changes to the camera and stuff. Open Unreal again, tracker. So I'm going to change this nDisplay to be a lot bigger, so that almost my environment just becomes like a little toy playset. And to do that, you have to child your camera under your nDisplay configuration as well. And now when you scale it up, both the camera and the screen are scaling up. And the tracking is still good. So I'm going to move it down. And then we're going to fix the camera focus and the camera field of view, or focal length. Save all and hit the nDisplay button. Now it's looking good. I'm happy with this. I have my little figure in the foreground. I had to use something that wasn't copyrighted. But there you go. Now it seems like it's working pretty good. Okay, so that's it. I hope you had fun with this. Make your own crazy VP setup. I'm sorry about the sound in the beginning. It was horrible. Bada bing, bada boom. Like and subscribe. See you next time.